Hi, I'm presenting my aerial photographic evidence for a mega tsunami strike on the eastern states of Australia. The generation of this tsunami is from a younger Dryas comet impacting the Pacific Ocean, with the size of this wave would be up around 3 kilometres and travelled over the Great Dividing Range, smothering mountains in sediment deposits, with the floodwaters filling the outback, creating an inland sea. And this inland sea would stretch from Brisbane to Melbourne, across the Broken Hill, down to Portland. Hi, this is Tasmania. It's a 900 square kilometre landmass that encountered a gigantic hydraulic event, the mega tsunami, that engulfed the island, engulfed the old Gondwana landscape, and forever removed the old world. So let's start exploring the seabed, where these whirlpools or eddies have scarred the landscape. And I believe it comes from the creation of these half-crescent beaches. Now, when we look at the bluffs, we can see out here very long, spindly fingers. Here, quite abrasive. Over here, again, like a toes. It's got this definition, and I'm saying that the water from the tsunami was coming back to the old sea levels under gravity. And this looks smoother, like the vegetation's growing back, except for the little green patch there. Again, we've got this spindly fingers, the dark spots on top over the vegetation, and the other half of the island doesn't seem to have as much erosion. There's no real beach in there. So I get the feeling these things were made at the time of the tsunami and just finished off over the last 12,000 years. Again, glued down vegetation from the sediment where there's a surface there, and these broken off spindly rock bluffs. So now, moving over northwesterly direction over the islands, we're now moving over northwesterly direction over the forestry areas and the silt rivers and the lakes of Great Western Conservation Area. Climbing above the central plateau, we see these torn, punctured holes of varied sizes. Some of the large ones would be up to 3 to 4 kilometres. Some of those, but while we're zooming in, we'll probably start to see a couple that are only a few feet wide. Now, this abrasive landscape has a marine alpine vegetation over it. And there's also appearances of puncture marks on Flinders Island. But anyway, we'll get to those later. Following the valleys out towards Maggs Mountain and Forest Reserve, we arrive over Lake St Clair, Australia's deepest lake, at 215 metres, and it's 700 metres elevation. So here we are, finishing off over the walls of Jerusalem. We're passing by Mount Osso, it's 1,600 metres tall, past the rocky escarpments to Cradle Mountain National Park. We'll zoom into here. You can see abrasive lines. So now we're past the Cradle Mountain summit, and we're moving down towards this hills, these mountains, smothered in this yellowy, syrupy, golden syrup textured deposit of sediment. And here we have again this alpine, kind of mossy, thick Tasmanian style vegetation. So these are all the highest mountains in here. And now we're getting back to where this knuckle. We're going to be talking a lot about these two, Lake Pedder and just... Now that big lake in the middle is Lake Pedder and Lake Gordon. And you can see the swirling effects underneath it. Now in the centre here is what I call the knuckle. And we can see a swirling effect right around that also. And here we have these lines that create a straight pattern all the way to this horseshoe rocky escarpment. And we'll have a little look at this because I find this unique. It seems to have weathering, like high velocity water weathering, even though it's so dark. It's got that chevron, sharp tooth, horseshoe. So now we'll flow back along these textured lines. This is quite large, but there's images like this burnt into the landscape in places like Queensland, New South Wales, where the velocity of the water would have been the pressure. Anyway, back to Tassie. I do like all this red mixed with the green, where there's been a whole new creation of valleys in there. The force of this tsunami. You can see all the vegetation. What was in there before they filled it with all the sediment? So we'll move to the right and have a look at this coating. It's as if all the red has been siphoned out of this, and all that's left is some icky, sticky, and I certainly know what this flood mud's like. It leaches over the rocks. And here we are back in the coastline. These are, again, more of these little craggly fingers. The rocky outcrops that... Oh, look at that. It just doesn't look untouched southwest, that coastline. I do like how it's got little gnaws along the coastline here. And then we have a sliced beach, a strand, there's a bluff. And we can see all the sediments come down this bluff. And we'll make our way looking at these. These are the old riverways that seem to hug the valleys and the mountains or the hills. But there's the sediments lifted up here, lifted up the landscape. And there's these swirling patterns. Carrying on up to the river, and another piece of sediment. We're heading towards South Ersk River in the northwest corner. But before that, we will venture around these hills right along the coastline, looking for patches, grass patches, tiny paddocks, kangaroo hunting grounds, where the silt and sediment built up to form a little campground, and the European practices have extended these. As we can see from this side, this one particularly here has all the hallmarks of where they would have been chasing them down the valley. There's a scratched area there, some shadows. But up the top here, I don't think they're coops. These are old areas where it would have been a lawn, a manicured estate with some sort of campground with a lawn. So here we can see all the silt. I mean, the river couldn't be more central from the two hillsides, from the valley, centred in a valley that's not a valley. These are just sand dunes. So I don't know what precipitation process is happening with all this chemical fertilizer, fertile floor of this valley. It's quite tight in there. Just doesn't look natural. That river, that doesn't look natural. Hello. Unnatural. So we'll leave the Southhurst River and head towards the northwestern corner again on the top, and we'll come across scratches on the landscape from an abrasive tsunami with boulders and gravel as sediment, leaving behind a silty, reddish, waxy finish. So this is a chevron, but it looks like it's facing the wrong way for a chevron. I don't think the wave would have come from the other direction, unless it retreated back that way. Here we are coming to Flinders Island. Nice long strand around the back. Visual abrasive natured tsunami. Now these holes could be dragged, holes like we'll see all over Australia in the desert, but trying to find punctured, pierced holes as to the vegetation, similar to the walls of Jerusalem's plateau. And we'll make our way to the coastline and we'll have a look around this coast, because there's lakes in Victoria that have a similar appearance, and we don't have the sketchy fingers at this point where the tsunami would have left that behind. Here we have gnaw marks, estuaries appearing where the water's reverted back to the old sea level, retreated back. A chunky landscape. Islands just ripped that whole piece of land apart. Heading towards the mainland, we notice this flange in the ocean bed. This is where the wave would have stretched and broken with a northerly section and a southerly. See this grey, browny, sort of flattened mountainsides, and here's some more of these green patches, these kangaroo hunting grounds, these paddocks, these sediment plateaus. It's quite obvious. Here we see the dusty sediment. Now we'll carry on down towards Lake's entrance and the inlets. But here, that lake there, you can see how it's flowed in. It's flowed out, it's been ripped through. Here's Corner Inlet. More evidence of abrasive tsunamis with silt and sediment, gravel and boulders. Shallow inlet, a bit of chompy coastlines here, hinged sort of exit, island that's had like a whirlpool spinning around it. We have some more of the chunkiness. Now we'll share some Indigenous stories from the Bunurong. The disharmony between tribes caused the sea to get angry, which began to rise and cover the plains and threatened to cover the whole country. They went to Bunjil, their god, and asked for help. He would only agree if they stopped their wayward life and obey the law. Where the Bunurong, Bunjil told two young companions to empty out their water containers onto the ground. The water caused a great flood that created Birrarung, the Yarra River, at Port Phillip Bay. So that's where we're at, having a little look around. And there's Geelong, the little silver city. Coonawarra, more lakes, just as if they've been punched into the surface. This is the oddest looking lake. It's as if there was a gigantic boulder landing there. Now we're coming up towards the lakes. Dry lake, doesn't look like it's volcanic. The ground here, it's got that marine sort of surface where there's been vegetation that should be on the bottom of the ocean. These precipitation lakes where the salts is drained, and just this surface here, it looks like an estuary but without the bay to join into. Some coastal features that may well appear on the coastline of Australia, especially around there. Now we're going to look for a dried up hole and find out how deep it is and what's in there. Again, this landscape, I think most of Australia had a huge water content above the ground, and everybody travelled on canoes. Nice and easy. Well, maybe that's a volcano, but no. It's probably more concave. Now here we have all these little puncture marks mixed with the vegetation all over the landscape. And there's all these little silvers. Another salt bed lake. There was all the vegetation in there. Streaks, fluvial, little dams, little lakes. It's glitter. Right now we're coming over Cape Otway down to Apollo Bay. Look at there. That looks like it's submerged land, broken away. Too much weight. That wave has hit that section of the landscape and destroyed it. So we're going to head back to Mount Kosciuszko, New South Wales. So we can see in there where the tsunami broke. Looking over the coast and the mountains, we see the ranges that had big dumps of sediment over them. And with this evidence, we can follow up the appearance of a wave climbing up behind Mount Kosciuszko, 2,228 metres, 7,300 feet. Now we can see all the silt and sediment here as it's run down the gully onto the grasslands and back to the ocean. So I hope you join me for the next video.